お、はいはいはい、こんにちは。ごめん。ソロへようこそ。ソロがサスケしたポッドキャストを見ています。Let's go! 3、2、1. Hello there, my anime people. Welcome back to Seoul Spectates. I am Seoul, and in today's episode, we'll be reviewing Ascendance of a Bookworm, Season 2. Breakdown. This anime show is a fantasy slice of life. It came out spring 2020, so it's still fairly new, and it's made by Studio Agiado. It has anime shows such as How Not to Summon a Demon Lord and Izetta the Last Witch, which I really do recommend. It's an amazing anime show. I love fantasy. That's one of my favorite genres. So these two that the studio has done already sets you up to know that this anime show should be great, especially because they do such a good job at building the world and making it seem so real, so that when they place the story, it has more substance to it other than just a generic world that our characters are in and we're not really paying attention to that world, but more the character and how they are traversing it. This anime show received a 8.4, and this comes from my anime list where 9,366 users voted. And during part 2 of this podcast, we're going to see whether or not that rating is deserved. So now we're going to get into synopsis breakdown. So this anime is a continuation of, obviously, Ascendance of a Bookworm, Season 1. And this time we're following Mind's adventure, and we're going to see her traversing the church and this noble society that she's never been a part of. As of Season 1, she's only had little glances and little touches here and there, but this time we're going to really go in depth into this other part of society that they kind of have and they share in the world that Mind's in. And she's still going to be working as a merchant, although not that much, because we're going to be focusing solely on the church. So that's it for the synopsis breakdown. I'm going to talk just a little bit about my opinions without having any spoilers for you guys that are still interested in whether or not you should watch this anime show. So for me, it's very exciting to see the world kind of expand, and it's very interesting in the fact that for this fantasy, we're sort of really focused on this town and some areas of neighboring woods and other people who aren't settled in this particular town. And we do know about the neighboring town across the water, but we're mainly focused on this town. And it's very interesting to see how vast and how different everyone is just within this area alone, whereas other fantasy shows tend to be very grandeur with this huge world map and different towns and cities and different religions and different way they act and eat and interact with each other, and makes you not really be able to focus on these small details that they add in to these towns and cities, because it kind of gets lost because you're not really there for such amount of time. Whereas this anime show is really focused and very particular in what they want to show you. And it's very interesting seeing Mind traverse not only where she is in her area in this impoverished section, and then kind of the upper echelon, but now she's going in depth in this church. So I like the progression that the anime is taking to introduce this town while not info dumping for us, but really kind of peeling the layers of this area through Mind's eyes and through her own interaction, her own understanding, which I enjoy a lot. And you kind of see Mind kind of really stumble through her journey in this church, because there's a lot of things that, she learns not only from a higher area of her city and then where she comes from, that just does not apply. And the church is really close to nobility. So they act as kind of a mediator, and they have certain practices that nobilities also have. So this is the first time that mine gets introduced to how to act as a noble. And she obviously is going to have a lot of issues, and it's really, really good. So definitely a must-watch anime. It goes even more in depth and it really helps us solidify a lot of characters. We don't get a lot of one-on-one with our own favorite characters that we kind of grew to love. Like her father, her mom, her sister aren't really there as much. They still show up in the anime, but it's really particularly just focusing on mine and the church. And I do like that they're taking their time with this, not just speeding it up. So first season we get introduced to not only this world, but also the people that she's around with. So I like that when she transitions out to the church, instead of bombarding you with a bunch of characters, they kind of still hint at them doing other things that are keeping them busy, while also really focusing on mine and introducing new characters and giving their own time to shine, which there's a lot of great characters that get introduced that are in this church that have affected mine in some way. So definitely watch. And this is the end of the spoiler-free section. I'm going to go into now the episodic breakdown, and there's going to be a lot of spoilers. So if you have not watched this anime show, trust me, definitely watch the first season, and whether or not you were a little bit off after the first season, whether or not you should continue, definitely continue. So this is a spoiler warning. After this, there will be spoilers. So now let's get into the episodic breakdown. So before I get into episode 1, I do want to recognize that, so this anime does have, I believe, 2 OVA episodes, and I love that when you get into season 2, episode 1, they actually refer back to it, whereas other OVAs don't really have a connection, or they're just trying to have fun or extend the story a little bit, or like what Naruto's annoying ass be doing where they fight and it's never referred back to, or even like Pokemon movies. Oh my goodness, would that shit get me so fucked up. I mean, the fact that you spend this whole time creating this story and weaving in, like really, giving it your all and going crazy, and then not connecting it to the mainline series baffled me. Like, it really, I could not understand why. So, I know that some of them don't always do this, but it's really much more fewer than not that don't actually try to do something like this. So it's really nice to see that they recognize the OVA and they're actually, calling out from it. So it's nice that it kind of, in a sense, rewards the person who actually watched it, whereas the other person that didn't will kind of feel like they're missing a little piece of what they're referring to, whereas the rest of us who have been able to watch it understand the story more fully. So I just want to give that little tidbit. So one thing that I found very interesting was the fact that mine had to keep her apprenticeship from the church a secret from her actual life. And this kind of piqued my curiosity because, so we knew ahead of time, towards the end of season 1, that her father did not wanted her to ever go to the church at all. And so, like, Gunther, her father, and Ava, her mother, they were very adamant when mine told them about it, and they were saying certain things, and it was kind of surprising because, I knew the church, especially back, during the Middle Ages and stuff, wasn't really the best, but it must have been somewhat better than just being, kind of abandoned. I'm specifically talking about how they accept children in the orphanage and how they induct them into, the church and gives them jobs and food and a place to sleep. So ahead of time, you already know that this is one of the things that kind of annoys them. But we feel, or at least I did while watching it, that something else was missing, that did not connect it. Yes, they were, mistreating orphans, and they view people, kind of below them, but you can say that about almost every noble around that area. So why is it that the church is very despised? And that's something that I wish could have been more fleshed out, but you kind of get a sense that the anime show is going to continue developing and wanting to hold off on everything just to make sure that it takes its time for you to really gather all the pieces that they're trying to place for you. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was the high priest's fuck up when he basically wanted to send in a spy so that he can monitor exactly what Mine's doing. And initially I thought it was supposed to be Fran, and then you later find out that it's actually Delia. But to me, it's kind of wild because the high priest sent her because she's the same age, or almost closely the same age as Mine. So he was hoping that, they'll become friends and, she can get herself in there. But Dahlia she's not dumb, but she's very upfront, precocious, and very, I guess, can't notice when she's clearly done something wrong. So right off the bat, she basically tells Mine that she's basically a spy. So obviously Mine's not going to trust you with any information. So my thing is, either the high priest should have chose someone that was older or smarter, or have her understand what she should have done from the beginning, because the plan would have honestly worked. It's just that he clearly chose the wrong one, which I thought was very funny. So now we're going to move into episode 2. Okay, so episode 2, some of the things that kind of caught my eyes was kind of the tension between Mine and the other people that work in the church, specifically the gray robes versus the blue robes, just because initially blue robes are only reserved for people of higher class and nobility that have, magic. But Mine was able to obviously finagle her way to be an exception. And this causes a lot of people, both people that are blue robed because they're supposed to be only the high crop that no one can touch. And, Mine is able to reach their rankings, while the gray robes are kind of like, why the hell is this bitch get to be a blue robe? Like, we don't understand. She does not have a higher standing order or isn't from nobility. So how is it possible that she's just like us and she was able to achieve this? So you kind of see that spark of issue that you can tell it probably stems from a lot of different things, and you can see the effects of she's not able to fit in being a gray robe, giving them orders and stuff like that, because they're kind of like, well, you should be one of us anyway, so I don't know why I should, take orders from you. And then she doesn't also fit with the blue robes because she's not from that world. So that causes her such a disconnect, because coming from where she actually is from, she fits in perfectly fine. And even with working as a merchant and doing stuff with Benno, there hasn't really been any issues. So her coming into an area where, she kind of solidified a placement for her, you would think she won't have any problems. All of a sudden, it's like she's literally stuck in a new world that she just cannot fit in. But you later see that just as much as she's having issues, so are the people around her. So that was one of the things that I really liked. And the craziest part was when Mine was reading, and after introducing herself to her retainers, which was Dahlia, Gil, and Fran, she wanted to read. They made it perfectly clear that, they don't view her as a blue robe and don't have that high esteem and respect yet. So she was basically over it. And she was reading her book. And then Gil comes up to her saying, hey, like, it's time for you to eat. And she's like, I don't know why you're talking to me. Why are you touching me? Like, you did not want to be our retainer. So why do you even care about even doing your job? And he was kind of like, well, you need to eat. And when her eyes started glowing with her power, I was like, yes, bitch, let him know not to touch you if you are reading and to not interrupt. Rude. Love that scene. But the thing is, so what's interesting is, even though Maya's a main character, and this show clearly it's geared towards her needing to be a likable character, because we're following the story through her, so we want her to be not necessarily perfect, still having enough where she is flawed, but not to an extent that she's hated. And I think as this episode progresses, you kind of sort of see how there are some things that she can easily fault and kind of, struggle and fuck up. And it's nice to see that, even with this anime being very, at least it tries to be as lighthearted as possible, it's nice to be able to see your character be full-rounded and not always trying to be palatable to the masses. And, in episode 2, you kind of first side with Mai because you see her retainers acting like a bunch of asses, and you kind of like, well, it's not her fault that she got this position, and she's trying her best. And it's not until episode 3 that you kind of get to see, oh, she still is lacking in a lot of the construct in this church, and her trying to figure out her placement and also what she has to do. I mean, half of it is no one really telling her, but the other half is kind of, well, you put yourself into this position, the least you can do is, know everything you have to know about it, not just assume that everything is going to be told to you. So you kind of get to see that in action when Gil kind of confronts her about the issues, and then that's when you kind of see like, hey, mine isn't perfect and she was in the wrong in this, and her retainers have a point. So you kind of get to see both sides kind of struggle, both her retainers to try to get to know her, understand her, and then her trying to understand her responsibilities and what she has to do to her retainers. So I enjoyed seeing that being played out. So in episode 3, some of the things that I kind of like is the whole cleaning scene where, after that whole altercation between Gil and mine, kind of her understanding what she has to do to fulfill as a blue robe to her retainers, and kind of her, going into action and setting a good precedent for herself, and kind of saying, well, if I am going to do this, at least what you can do for me is make sure that you actually work. So this whole, if you don't work, you don't eat, kind of becomes their motto. And she trusts Gil to clean a new area that she has received from the other, he's not really a high priest, I guess, like he's the almost like intermediator, so he's still higher than the other blue robes, but not to his stature, and that's Ferdinand. And he allows Mai to basically take over the orphanage, and so she gets the studio for it, and she basically tells Gil that he can clean, which a lot of people were looking at her like, oh, you're gonna be very disappointed, like you can't really trust him. And I really like her putting that trust in him, and him seeing what she, kind of gave him a chance to do, and him not trying to squander that opportunity. So when he, gets down to it, he starts cleaning. Obviously, to me, I already felt that he has cleaned. So when Mine walks in with the rest of the retainers, you're kind of just like, oh boy, he did not clean anything. But he actually started from upstairs because that's where her room is. And he wanted to make sure that was at least the first thing that got done first, since that was the area that's going to be used. So, Mine was very proud of him. She got him to kneel down and she thanked him and, rubbed his head. And it was just a very sweet moment. And you kind of see Gil kind of being happy at the fact that he has Mine, who is a blue robe, but she's also a regular person and she doesn't act like a blue robe, which has its benefits. Even though at the beginning it may have shown a couple flaws, it definitely has more benefits because she's not as cold as, the monarchs are, and she doesn't think or do the same things that they do. So she's more responsive, more respectful, and they're more willing to give her what she needs because they know that they're doing it for someone that truly does care for them. And I thought that was a very, very nice way to not only see that they're coming around to her, but they're starting to build that framework in order to trust each other. So the other thing I also liked was that I don't know about you guys, but to me it's kind of wild that before, the major tropes of an isekai is kind of, being teleported to a new world, having someone there and everything kind of already organized for you, and you're going through the waves and the motions and going on these grand adventures. But now it kind of seems like the isekai is starting to show, introductions to certain things, like bringing back inventions from Japan, or certain foods that they like, and certain ideas that they used to do. I do like that at least they're not making it seem like Mine is creating the next printing press and doing all these other crazier things. But a lot of the stuff that she did while she was a Japanese girl is obviously helping her out tremendously and translating over. But it's interesting to see that it seems like a lot of isekais are starting to use this trope of, even though they're brought into a new world, they're trying to bring back a little bit of, the world that they used to know, and it's making them either richer or helping them out, or it's being used in some type of way, which, don't get me wrong, I really like. So you see this with Mai bringing in Italian food. So it's nice to see that she is still doing stuff like that, even though she is in the church. Because I was kind of worried, she's still a merchant, but she's not really doing too much in that regard. So I was kind of wondering where that was kind of leading into. So now we're going to go into episode 4. Okay, so in episode 4, we kind of get to finally see why, Mine's father and mom was very particular about letting her in, and the fear about the mistreatment that they might do to her. And that's why they're kind of, worried and wanting her to not pick the church, during season 1, because she didn't know the extent of what the church is. And especially coming from a background where church works a little bit differently, in Japan and the world that she came from, coming in here works way differently. So when you see the degradation, the way that, this church wants to put a happy smile and do things for, this community while also mistreating these kids that have nowhere else to go. And I mean, I understand, it requires a lot of money. They're not getting a lot of funding. They used to have a lot of, monarchs, but they're slowly not doing, working with the church and stuff. And I mean, the simple fact that if you can't take them in, don't. But keeping them in like that and giving them those horrible treatments, it was just deplorable. I did not like that at all. it was also very shocking. I mean, no wonder, these townspeople have such a distrust with the church. I mean, who wouldn't after seeing how they would treat their own? So, but that also begs the question then, because I know that the church holds a ceremony every, I believe, is spring, in order to basically, teach them about a little bit about religion, and it gives them their kind of authentication to show they're, born in this city, and it's kind of sort of like an ID. But is there no other way to do it? I mean, if you distrust the church so much, why let your kid do this whole thing that's clearly a way for the church to get some type of grace? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me how you don't like the church, but you don't work with or against them. And also, knowing what will still kind of allow them to run the way they do. It's an interesting dynamic for sure, but it definitely needs to be fleshed out and explained just a bit more, because and I mean, this is one of the hard things about this kind of anime, where it wants to showcase a little bit of the world and what's going on and how that affects Mai in some way and her path to this story. But it also becomes very complicated with, if you don't show enough, it doesn't make any sense. But if you show too much, it drives away from the story. So having something that's a middle ground is still good. But, when you're an avid anime fan, you just want to gorge. And, when you find a good anime with a good world, you kind of want to know everything about it. I mean, this is how Harry Potter became so famous. I mean, the world just, even though it was fantasy, it felt so real because the amount of work and effort that went into creating these places and people wanting to know more. I mean, people always want to know more. I mean, look at the movie A Quiet Place. They just needed a monster that was kind of killing people, and they designed it and went on with it. But then later on, people wanted to know where they come from. Why do they look like this? Is it due to evolution? What made them, come here? And why is it that only this and that? And all of a sudden people wants more. And it's that balance that they kind of have to do. I mean, they showed enough, which is sufficient, but when you want to know more about a place that you really care about, you can clearly tell that the writer took its time to flesh it out. All you want to do is just know more, and that's where kind of my greediness comes from. We're trying to figure out a little bit about this, but that was kind of the main point that I wanted to drive with this episode. And we can also see that more about Mind's quirks, about, her not necessarily thinking things through, which they need to be careful about, because it's starting to become a repetitive theme with her, with, she jumps into something because, it's incredibly, it just drives her, and then there's obviously an obstacle or a fuck up, and then she finds a way to maneuver, and then everything goes great. So they just have to be careful with that repetition. That it's, you could kind of see that it's starting to build up a little bit. So now we're going to go into episode 5. Okay, so for this episode, there has been a lot of growth that has been going on between Mine and her retainers, and kind of the role that they play within this church. And it was very nice to see, because you see the slow progression through the other episodes where, they first meet each other. It's not the best. She's trying to get her point across. They're trying to get their point across. She's slowly starting to learn, and that allows them to learn as well with her. And in this episode in particular, is where you see kind of everything tested, and how the fruition is being accepted by not only themselves with each other, but also the people around them. And particularly 2 instances I really want to talk about is when Mine, you could see that she was taking her role seriously, because when she was handing over the food to the orphanage, And there was this particular food that she made for a reward for people who went above and beyond. Some of the people, some of these kids were like, and some of the people in the gray roles were, attacking her, like, oh, like, why don't we get that? Like, that's food too. We should get that too. She was like, no, 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 no. Hold on. Hold the fuck on. This is not food that I'm giving you. The food I'm going to give you is over here. This is for rewards for people who went above and beyond. Now, if you want to get something like this, then go above and beyond in what you do. But don't come over here telling me that I'm not going to feed the rest of you, because I am. This is just an extra special reward. And that's that. Like, whereas the older mind, I feel like, would have given them all that bread for a reward on top of the food that she was going to give them anyways. She was very stern in letting them know that if you don't work hard, you're not going to get a prize. And she was also quick to defend herself, as a blue robe would have, which is, do not slap the hand that feeds you. These are the rules that I have in place. This is what you have to follow. If you don't like it, that is your problem. But she, silenced everyone, silenced the whole crowd, and everything just kept rolling. So you can finally see her solidifying herself into this blue robe and finally getting the hang of everything, which was very nice to see. And then the side of the retainer, specifically with Fran, there's a scene that after they collect, all of this of wood and kind of destroys the church just a tiny bit, but then they fix it anyway, so it was, it was fine. So mine gets called in by Ferdinand to basically talk to her about that incident, and he was very annoyed, and he wanted her to basically repent by herself. So he was going to put her in this closet that's dark by herself kind of thing. And you see that Fran was trying to tell him, no, don't do this, she's not strong for that. And Ferdinand took it as, well, she's not taking this shit seriously, and you're just trying to defend her to not have her go through this punishment. So Ferdinand still puts her through the punishment. Then when he comes back, she's on the floor, passed out with a fever. And Ferdinand finally gets that, click that Fran was trying to warn him. And he even tells him too, he was basically saying, it wasn't that you didn't want her to go through the punishment, it's that you knew that she wasn't strong enough to handle it. And Fran was basically saying, listen, sometimes you do not understand the validity of how sick this girl really is and how fragile she is, and you're taking it as not seriously or as a joke. And that was what I was trying to warn you. And I was just like, oh my God, whereas before Fran could not notice these things about her, now he's very in tune to mine and her needs, and that's what makes a good retainer. So the fact that he was able to notice that and voice his opinion about that and then take care of her thereafter was just perfect to see that growth within both character, within mine's character as a blue robe, and then her gray robes that are helping her work. So now we're going to move into episode 6. So in episode 6, it's really focused on Lutz and his father and how they grow, which to me, I'm not going to lie, was complete bullshit, because you go through the understanding through Lutz's eyes that his father does not accept his career, which has been shown so many times with him saying no to the stuff that he's doing, fighting against him, not talking to him, and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, when they go to talk to, Ferdinand and mine is there, and they're all kind of talking about what's been happening, and his family's there too, and even Benno is there too. It ends up being that, oh no, it wasn't that I didn't want you to go. When I said go do whatever you want to do, that doesn't mean no, don't do it. It just means that I'm allowing you to do whatever you want. I have accepted what you want to do. You can't be a crybaby about it. You have to, put your feet down and go the road that you want to go, even if it means against my own wishes. So he was basically proud of him, and he was okay with what he was doing. He just has to be a man about it. But I was like, Yeah, you could have just said that. I feel like if you would have just said that and not those words, and particularly with the way you're talking, the way you're showing your actions, I feel like none of this would have happened. This, incorrect interpretation. But I guess it's how they grow. And the father, oh my God, they make him seem like such a caveman. Can't even speak like coherent sentences with the way he wants to talk, and how his wife is able to decipher his bum ass like ability to be affectionate and show feeling, like she's able to decipher what he says, so he can be like no, and then she's over here like, oh well, he means, I love you so much and I want to protect you, so I don't want you to go because it will hurt me so much if I'm like, you get all of that from a no? Okay, girl, work. So that was the main point of this episode. The only other thing I can think of was you kind of see Fernand's intention, which is just like, finally, someone seeing mine basically being weird. I mean, no one ever questions. I mean, yeah, sure. The girl makes one or two inventions that are revolutionary. She's making a lot of money. Perfectly fine. But now you're expecting me to believe that every single thing that she makes is a whole new invention that people have not even thought of. Like, not even once. So for me to believe that mine is able to do all this at such a young age is not even possible. I mean, you see the trajectory of mine's age, especially with, the sickness that she has, and you're expected to believe that this girl was able to make it out of pure intelligence. That never happens, that we only see the questioning ever happening with Lutz. You never see it happening with her mother or father ever, which you would think, like, there have been so many movies where a mother can tell, that this is not her child. But I guess this mother could not care less about who is inhabiting her child's body. It's just, my child is here alive. That's all I care about. But okay. So you see Fernand, questioning this. And if you remember in the first season, and this is like a big spoiler if you haven't seen this, which I'm assuming you are listening because obviously I told you these have spoilers. But one of the biggest thing was you get introduced to mine and Fernand early, and he's kind of like tapping into her brain. So you kind of get to see him kind of wander more, and you kind of get to see where it kind of leads up to that. And it's just really interesting to see what would he do or what would he think about it. So, and that's kind of where we're going to leave it off with episode 6. So overall, what I'm thinking so far is the anime is going really good with how, they're doing their world building, introducing more characters and doing more character building. I am interested to see where this anime goes. It does kind of suck because a lot of the characters that were introduced before, my favorite ones, they don't get a lot of showtime, which again makes sense because there's going to be way too much characters to juggle, so it's easier to just, separate that, and when they need a character, bring them in and then phase them out, because after the first season, kind of getting to really know them, you kind of get a sense of what they want to be doing and what they are doing most of the time, so you don't really need them in the scenes, and it gives time for these new characters to shine, which there are a lot of favorites that I have, like Fran and Benno. I like Gil too, he's a good one. So you kind of get, introduced to all these characters. Wilma too, like, love her. So I'm interested to see where this leads, because I know for the most part it's basically her trying to chase her dreams, of making this book and one day opening a library and all this other stuff. So as of right now, the anime is obviously taking its time with it, and I'm interested to see where the story goes for this, because for things like this, which is a little bit more slice of life kind of thing, you don't really know where things will go, because life in general isn't something that it's, I guess you could say, trackable, where like most stories always have a goal in mind and a story arc. Mine doesn't have that because this is her life, so they kind of pick and choose certain things that they want to show of her life that then, shows that story arc towards the end. So when I'm watching it, I can't really decipher what the storyline is, where in other anime shows I'm able to. For this one, it's kind of just, I'm going on with this ride and I'm seeing where, the story takes me. So I'm interested to see what happens next. I mean, at this point, we finally see her finally making her first book, and, she's extremely happy. We kind of get to see all the hard work that it took her, to do this. And I mean, it took her a whole second season before she's able to do it. And at that, like, almost halfway done through it too. So, it shows a lot how they're doing this. But I'm also thinking future-wise, like, where is this anime could possibly go? I mean, they can't keep her small forever because, I mean, people want to see, what happens when she grows and all this other stuff. But as of right now, it's very endearing. It's still grabs my attention. I love it so much. Enjoyed every episode. I mean, honestly, like, such a good anime. If you're one that likes to sit down and really see character growth and development, which I adore so much, this is so good. So I've enjoyed all of that. Now, in terms of characters so far, the one that I'm most interested in is still Ferdinand, because at this point he's the only one really questioning who Mine really is and is actively trying to do something to investigate her. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And I'm also interested to see the High Priest, because he got Dahlia to spy on Mine and report back, but you know how that went. Not doing a good job of it. So she's not doing that anymore. So my thing is, has he really given up on, like, trying to figure out about Mine and stuff that she's doing, or what? Because it seems like he was an obstacle, but then that kind of died really quickly. So I'm wondering if he's gonna come back to show be another obstacle, how Ferdinand is another obstacle. And I'm also interested to see if this is the season that loops back to what we originally saw in the first season with Ferdinand entering Mine's mind. So I'm interested to see if this is the season that goes full circle for us, or whether or not we have to wait for another season for that to happen. So that is everything I want to talk about. Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast, and I'll see you next time.